Testing. A'udhu billah. Bismillah. Testing. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على رسوله الكريم وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين. Respected brothers and sisters here and online, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have been discussing Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening, Fatiha al-Kitab, also known as Surah Al-Hamd, a chapter of Allah's book that is the opening and is part of every salah and every prayer, as we've been told by the Holy Prophet, as is attributed to him, La salata illa bifatihat al-kitab, that there is no prayer except with this chapter of the Holy Book. We have gotten to the point where we discussed the concept of Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'een the other day, and now we are moving on to this level of understanding of Ihdina as-siratal or Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim ghayr al-maghdubi alayhim waladdallin, the last verse. Now, I should say very importantly here that Surah Al-Hamd has many layers, and we are going through this according to what Mufassirin would say, according to what experts in the Quran would say, people who are experts in the exegesis of the Quran, they would say this is relatively a fast analysis, because many of them spent many days and weeks on one verse. Indeed, many people have spent even a year in tafsir of just Bismillah. Of course, given the time, we don't have all that time to go into those depths. But I do want to discuss a few aspects with respect to this particular verse. Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim ghayr al-maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. The path of those whom you have blessed, and not of the path of those who have gone astray. One theme, as I've mentioned in Surah Fatiha is a summary in some sense of the entire Quran, in the sense that our goal in life is try to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ultimately be on the right path to make this world a better place in some sense, and not be the cause of injustice, dhulm and oppression and problems in this world. You find different categories of people in our world. You find, for example, those who are just living their life normally. Every day is another day. They go to work, they go to sleep, they eat, they sleep, things of this nature, and they live in a world and a system. And the system gives, for example, job opportunities. The system gives, for example, or it may not give job opportunities. We may be talking about the West, East, we may be talking about the North, the South, we may be talking about Africa or India or something of that nature. So I just wake up in the morning and I realize, okay, I have to go to work, then I have to look after the kids, then I have to go to sleep, eat and then sleep. And then I repeat every single day. I have to pay my bills, things of this nature. And many people live at the effect of the world in which we exist and not think much about changing the world. There's another category of people who are the problem, unfortunately, in our society. The problem being, they are the reason for injustice, they are the reason for oppression, they are the reason for dhulm. They may be political figures, they may be people in our own communities, they may be different types of people. The Quran has warned us to not be in that category. There's a third category of the people who are trying to be part of the solution. These would be the prophets, the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and people who follow them closely, correctly, such as in our line, Abu Dhar or Miqdad or Ammar or these types of companions of Rasulullah and Imam Ali. These people would be people who are part of the right path. But there's another level that I want to explain here. You remember the first category that I mentioned, the first category about people who are just living their life? As per the Quran, one can make the argument that even if you are just existing, but you're not concerned about the affairs of society, you're part of the problem. And this is something that we need to consider in our modern world. That if there are problems in our world, and we are not speaking out about them, or we are not doing something about them, or at least we're not doing one thing, similar to the bird example of the bird in the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when Ibrahim was being thrown towards the fire of Nimrud, and the bird took a little bit of water and sprayed it or just dropped it on the fire of Nimrud, and they asked, what is this going to do? What is this going to help with? Please.
belonging, because we yourself are still searching or trying to establish yourself.
Sure. So how can one individual do something when you're still trying to find your own path and your own path in terms of life, like where you're trying to go in life? Very good. So there are some things that are particularities and there are some things that are, for example, specifics. This is a really great question, and I think this gets at the heart of a lot of reflection that people have. Because one of the dynamics of the modern world is we don't have good answers to what one should do with life, right? So these are very open-ended, what should we? So now if you're still trying to find your path, that's totally fine, well and good, and as you should do, because Allah has given each person a respective skill set that they have that's unique to them. So you may be, for example, very good at writing, or you may be very good at speaking, or analysis, or many things. And that unique combination Allah has given you. Now the question comes is, well, if I'm still trying to find myself, which so many people are trying to find themselves, how do I stand for justice in society, try to make the world a better place, and do like the bird was doing in that sense? So there are some things that are common, and I'll try to refer here to, the Quran is very clear on this, but as a secular example that you can take to work and school and everywhere. Plato, Aflatun, who's the second of the three great Greek philosophers. There was Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Plato wrote his book called The Republic. In The Republic, it's a voluminous work in that he said that he laid the foundations for political science and economics and how to run society in that book. It's one of the first books in philosophy as well, in Western philosophy, because Socrates, his teacher, didn't write anything himself. So Plato, his student, wrote. Anyways, he says that the first responsibility of an individual, and by the way, I should just give a little hint, Plato's student Aristotle, is actually taught in the Hawza, or his works is highly focused, a lot of the Hawza still relies on some of his work. For example, what? Aristotelian logic, the mantiq that is taught in the Hawza, parts of it is influenced by Aristotle. And some ulama actually believe that Aristotle is possibly a prophet, because Allah sent 124,000 prophets, and it's very possible, because he believed in Allah, God, and all these concepts, that he may have been a prophet. Anyways, his teacher Plato, Aflatun, said in The Republic, the first responsibility of every individual is to the state. That is, that whether we need to take a responsibility in our societies, and that's our primary responsibility. The argument he made was, and I'm not saying everything he's saying is right, of course there's many problems in what he says, but there's also things that may be valuable. What happens is, if we as individuals do not get together to care for the concerns of the state or the community or the society at large, what ends up happening is it gets hijacked in some sense by certain individuals who have certain interests. And they've also said, the philosophers, that look, if you are not willing to stand for political office or societal office, then you have to be willing to be ruled by someone who may be less intelligent than you, less capable than you. So what I'm saying is, I know it's difficult to be able to, you're finding your own way, but at the same time, how do I stand up and do the right thing, like try to make the society and the world a better place? As per the Quran and Islam, we have to sort of make time for those things. We know Allah has told us what's good, what's bad. So we have a nature of what's good and what's bad. And so that's really where we can try to contribute. Now, that doesn't mean that our particular, that's at the societal level, doesn't mean necessarily our particular instance of us as an individual, we can't find that along the way. But I want to actually give you an opportunity to maybe follow up on that. Is that help, or is that, am I going away from your question? That's a good question.
I don't know. I might be thinking that I'm giving the solution. I might be giving the problem.
That's a very good point. This goes back to actually Aflatun, again, Plato. So he said that, interestingly, he actually said democracy as we know it in our world, he said democracy is the worst form of government, actually. It's really bad, because it becomes mob rule every time. Because we have defined democracy that we use because it is the lesser of evils. And what Plato said, and actually Churchill acknowledged this, Churchill said democracy is the worst form of government except everything else has been tried. All the others are much worse. This is just the least worse. And so what Plato said was democracy, when it's majority rule, it becomes the person who is, it becomes mob rule. So it becomes parties, like in our modern world. Conservative party, Democratic party. Within the parties, there's tea parties, this party, that party. I don't want to get into particular parties, but the idea is, he believed in a concept of intellectual aristocracy. And this gets at the heart of your question. Intellectual aristocracy is that the smartest people are the ones running society. Now, the problem with the smartest people running society is sometimes, unfortunately, people don't have ethics and they've misused their authority. So to your point, this is why ilm is so important. Because there's the old saying that you may have heard that to your point, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That I may mean good, I may tell you that this is what you should be doing, and I may have good intention, but that may be the wrong solution, as your point says. It's very valid. That's why one of the most beautiful aspects of the Quran, to me at least, and Islam at large, is it invites people to knowledge. It invites numerous times to wisdom, to hikmah, to knowledge. Our dear brothers in other faiths, in Christianity for example, and other faiths, because of, if you remember what I mentioned in some of the previous talks, there was the Council of Nicaea that happened in Constantinople, which is modern day Turkey or Istanbul. And Constantine wanted to unite his entire ummah or his nation under one religion. So there was many different forms of Christianity. He said you have to believe in one form of Christianity, and he brought everyone together, if you remember that conversation. And so now modern Christianity, because it's not able to explain the Trinity or other aspects, it has to rely on faith only. So you hear this narrative a lot in our Christian friends, although they're sincere, they're good people, but the religion, because of the compromises that occurred and the changes in the Bible, you have to go back to the red letter Bible to get a more accurate Bible. The Bible has been, for example, the King James one is not the most closest to the original Bible. The closest that we know of that's documented is the red letter Bible, which is many hundreds of years old. You can still get it. The point that I'm getting at here is much of modern Christianity has become faith, and sometimes blind faith. You hear a very, very common saying that happens in modern Christianity. It's faith is like taking the first step on a staircase, although you don't see the rest of the staircase. I mean, in Islam we also have the concept of yaqeen and certainty, but that's built on ilm, that's built on knowledge, that's built on hikmah. So the answer, the slow answer to this, or the short answer I should say to this is, we have to make a commitment to knowledge. Knowledge in Islam is not optional. It is something that is a obligation on every Muslim or Muslimah, according to the talabul ilm fariidatun ala kulli Muslim wa Muslimah. So yes, now going back to your point, which the brother's point is very, very important. Very, like, what if I'm trying to help someone and I'm trying to make a positive contribution to society, but what I'm saying is not good for you? This even happens to the level of the maraji, believe it or not. Our maraji even make mistakes. Historically they have. You'll remember the very famous example, some say to Al-Mahilli, some say to others, that he gave a fatwa. And the fatwa was for a mother who was expecting a child. And the mother died while the child was in the womb. And when the mother, when they asked the Shaykh, they said, Ayatollah, what do we do? Do we bury this child with the mother deceased, or do we remove the child? And he said, you cannot, essentially the extent was, you cannot harm a body of someone who has passed away, and you bury the child with her. And then on the way back, after some time, that same child came back many years later with the father and said, Agha, do you know who this is? He said, no, who is this? This is the child who you had said to bury him with the mother, but then at the funeral a horseman came and said that, remove the child. The Agha has changed his fatwa. And then he began to cry and he said, I'm never going to give a fatwa again, because he realized that this was not his, this was from the Imam alayhi salam. And so the idea is, the concept is, you do your best to get knowledge and have sincerity and expect the rest, the guidance come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very possible on Yawm al-Qiyamah that someone, for example, what about those people who never got the message? There are people in the Amazon rainforest, for example, who have never had contact with the modern world. So what if they were sincere? What if they looked after their families and they had, for example, assuming they didn't get a prophet, because Allah sent 124,000 prophets and things of this nature, and maybe Allah sent them to them, or maybe He didn't, we don't know. But there is room for this, for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately at the end of the day. So the short answer is, what if I have a responsibility to society? Part of that responsibility is to be aware, to seek knowledge, to have sincerity, and do the best that I can. And that way on Yawm al-Qiyamah, at least I can say, Ya Allah, I tried. And then we go from there. Does that help a little bit, inshallah? It's a wonderful question. But the crux of the Quran, as we understand it, is to get us to do exactly what you're doing, which is reflection. To really stop and think. The ancient philosophers used to say, Islam says, the life that is not reflected is not worth living. The unreflected life is not worth living. Socrates had said this. That the life that you don't think about, it's not worth living. You know how he found this out? He called himself the Gadfly of Athens. Gadfly is the one that, sometimes you see the bulls or the cows, and there's a fly that's like going in front of them, and then they move here and there. And so it causes you to think in a certain way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes He takes insects and makes us think. Namrud, who was the person who was against Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah had a small bug, like a mosquito or a fly, go into his nostril. For 40 days it caused him tremendous pain and agony and annoyance. And then he died after that, Namrud, or Nimrod as he's called in English. You see, Allah sometimes made these insects to humble the zalimeen, the oppressors, these people. So the smallest thing caused this person to go, to die, essentially. Similarly, Socrates called himself the Gadfly of Athens, that this is the fly that when it moves here and there, it makes society move here and there. So he would go into the bazaar. This is 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. He would go to the bazaar and he would ask the main general of society, like the 4-star general, the commander, and ask him a question. He would ask the main judge of society, the chief justice, a question. They would all be in the bazaar buying things and things like that. And he would say, well, what makes a good commander-in-chief? What makes a good justice? What makes a good general? What makes a good president? What makes a good... And he would ask them these questions, and they would say, a good person, a nice person, a smart person, or things like this. And then he would ask another question, then another question. And the conclusion he came to, that the commander, the general, many times, the chief justice many times, the best people in society, many times they didn't know why they were there. They didn't have good answers. They were just there. And so he was saying many people don't reflect, they don't think about their life. Why am I here? What am I doing with my life? How did I get to where I'm getting to? What advice would I give to my children? What advice would I give to my family? How can we make society better? We just say, oh, this is the system, and I have to live within this system. But this is why the prophets came. The prophets all said, this system that you have is a broken system. You need to reform this system. Nabi Ibrahim, he got them thinking, why are you believing in these idols? He used to drag them through the street. He broke the idols. He did all of these things to get people to think. As you remember, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, he destroyed all the idols at one point in time and left one of them. He said, ask the big one, ask him if he can tell you. To get them to think and rationalize. So when we come to this verse of the final one, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. The path of those who you have given your ni'mah, your blessings, and not the one who have gone astray. Now, who are those, who Allah has given ni'mah to? Ni'mah can be material. We may say it's material. Is it? Like for example, there's somebody who's the richest person in society. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, these people. Does that mean ni'mah as per the Quran? Maybe, maybe not. But that's not necessarily the Quranic definition. Why? Because Fir'aun had a lot of material wealth. Namrud had a lot of money. That doesn't necessarily mean they were the people who are blessed by Allah. Sarat al-ladina anamta alayhim. That would not necessarily mean they're part of that category. Now, that also doesn't mean that if Allah has blessed someone with wealth, that they're automatically bad. Sometimes we do this game of automatically categorizing people. But as per the Quran, it's not necessarily because someone has worldly ni'mah, they are blessed by Allah. Not necessarily. So what is the ni'mah? The ni'mah are those who are on the path of the Ahlul Bayt, the path of Islam, the path of the Prophets, and ultimately the best ni'mah is the one who are on the path of the Ahlul Bayt, because it funnels through. It starts with the prophets, then goes down to the Mursaleen, those people, the Holy Prophet himself, and those who follow the straight path. Because we are told that Rasulullah himself has said, there will be 72 or 73 sects after me. One of them will be correct. All of the others will be wrong. So that is the blessed path. The path of those who have a closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are following, those are the ones who are blessed. Now who are those individuals? And by the way, we should always say the Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those who are blessed by you, Ya Allah, before we start anything, before whether that's work, school, life, marriage, otherwise, this whole chapter is a dua. Number one. Number two, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Who are those people who have gone astray, who have been inflicted with the wrath of Allah? In this there are also categories. One category are those, for example, who were the people of Ayyam Jahiliyyah, or the people who are even worse, like Fir'aun, Namrud, Shaddad, Haman, all of these people. These are people who from the beginning, they were very wretched people. They were only concerned with their power and oppressing people and doing dhulm. Then there's another category. The second category are those people who maybe they started on the right path, but they fell off the right path. So for example, you're going on the highway, we're going on the highway, for example, of Tashayyu, of Shiaism. There's the highway, it starts, exit 1 comes, exit 2 comes, exit 3 comes, someone gets off on exit 4. That's the Zaydi, for example. You go further, someone gets off on exit 6. That's the Shishamami, Ismaili, for example. Someone goes further, someone gets off on exit. For example, Waqifiyya, the 7th Imam. As you know, there's a movement. Someone gets off on some exit. Our goal is to keep going on the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. We don't want to exit off of it and go off the wrong path. So who are some people who, according to the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, were on the right path, but they went off on the wrong path, or they got off on the wrong exit, as we would say. One example is clear, Bani Israel. As per the Quran, Allah gave them numerous blessings. Allah says that we gave them tremendous blessings. We gave them prophets to guide them. We made them special people. We did everything. Yet they did not appreciate our gift. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they had certain traits that were the cause of them going from the straight path off the straight path. What were those traits? For example, one of them was that they would constantly question the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah will, for example, send them a sign, and it's a clear sign. They would say, no, send us another sign. We want it in this particular way. So He would send that. And they would keep doing this as if they were playing games with the messenger of Allah, number one. Number two, they were people who were obsessed with the material, according to the teachings. What does that mean, with obsessed with the material? So for example, Allah's messenger, Nabi Musa, for example, would tell them, come with me and go do this and do that. And they would say, for example, we want to value our life. We value it's too much effort and things of this nature. This was another thing that has been commented by the ulama. The third thing that the ulama say is that they started to do tahrif of the rule of Allah. They started to change the laws and regulations and the rules of Allah in society. Again, this becomes a sort of understanding of our modern world as well. Our modern world is changing for the better on one side, and it's perhaps sometimes changing for the worse on other sides. What are some aspects of where the society in our modern world? So for example, Banu Israel was making, Allah said, this is the law, these are the 10 commandments, follow them. They said no. For example, they said no, we're going to follow it our way. So they started making changes. So where are changes good in our society and where are changes bad? You may find, for example, in our modern world, we are trying to make the world more just. So for example, racism is still a problem in our society, but it was much more in the 60s, it was even more than that in the 1920s in America, and it was even much more than that 200 years ago in America. Are we where we need to be? Definitely not. We have a lot more work to do. But society is trying to go in a better direction there, at least trying. Slowly, very slowly, but still. But what are problems of our society? One thing that is emerging that is a challenge as per the Quran is, as you know, it's a responsibility on us as followers of Ahlul Bayt and Muslims to do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. To promote good and forbid evil. Now, there are also conditions to this. One condition is when you do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, if you promote good or you tell someone to do something or you try to tell them to stop, there's a few conditions. One condition is you should expect the person may follow what you're going to say. If you know 100% that they're not going to listen to you, you're not obligated necessarily to tell them. There's also a requirement to be in privacy, to try to do it in private, not necessarily do it in front of everyone, for example. But Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar, to promote good and to forbid evil, goes right back to what we started this conversation with. If you go back to Plato, when Aflatun said, the first responsibility is to the state, the first responsibility is to society. If we become agnostic to the affairs of society, what ends up happening is our society ends up drifting into the wrong direction. That's why the Quran, if you understand one theme of the Quran, is many of the nations went astray, and many of the nations went off on the wrong track because they didn't speak up, or they didn't say something or do something about the problems that were happening in society until a messenger came. When a messenger came, then some people followed and others didn't, but most perished. So for us, we need to understand that Allah has created us for a much greater purpose. Why is it that some people become world leaders? Why is it that some people, for example, find some of the most amazing, for example, treatments of medical issues? They find economic systems and the likes. I want to give a very interesting example. I don't know, this is one of my favorite stories. The Nobel Prize that was awarded, that's awarded every year, you must have all heard of the Nobel Prize that's awarded in medicine, and Peace Prize, and all of these other economic sciences, chemistry, physics, and the likes. Do you know how that came about? The prize? Alfred Nobel was the man who was instrumental in the development of TNT, dynamite, the explosives. And what happened was, he was in Europe, and his brother died. When his brother died, all of the press said, they put a headline in the news, it's about 150 years ago or so, 100 years ago, they put a printout in the news that the merchant of death has died. That is because of his TNT and explosives and dynamite that he created, and he made a lot of money off of it, many people died because they were used as explosives. He had a shock, because the newspaper thought that Alfred Nobel himself died, but his brother died. And they made the headline of the news article based on the actual Alfred Nobel who created TNT and dynamite. But he was alive, his brother died. He said, this is my legacy in society? This is my legacy in the world? This is how I will be remembered after I die? I'm the person who made money because other people were dying? I made money out of creating this product? It caused him a complete shock in his life. So he said, I must spend the rest of my life to do good. So he took all of his money, he created a fund in order to facilitate the sciences, physics, mathematics, chemistry, and they're still adding other sciences. Every year there's a prize, and they give a $1 million reward to whoever gets the award, and they help to try to make the world a better place. Now, Alfred Nobel would not have that moment if the newspaper did not make that mistake and say the merchant of death has died while he's alive. Now you go and come back and relate this to the hadith of Rasulullah, where he's attributed to have said, Mutu qabla an tamutu. Die before you die. Ya Rasulullah, what are you saying, die before you die? That is, sometimes we have this ego within us. Sometimes we have this person within us, and until we hit our deathbed, we don't realize. So stop and reflect while you're alive. What is my legacy? How will I be remembered? How will people remember me? Will they remember me as a good person or a bad person? Will they remember me as someone who tried to make the world a better place or a worse place? Will they remember me as someone who tried to do things for my own benefit or for others' benefit? And when we understand these things, inshallah, we'll be able to get to a better place. So this is the dua. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ya Allah, keep us on the path of those who you have blessed, and not on the path of those who have gone astray. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this dua from us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and all those who are present. And Ya Allah, we ask you to hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns, those who are guided on Sirat al-Mustaqim. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Jazakallah, thank you.